Testing. Yeah. I want to thank Rabbi Wardy for the speakers. Thank you, Rabbi Wardy. Without further ado, we're going to start the program tonight. I want to start off by thanking the founder of this program for this summer and 2 summers ago, the first summer was Mashiach, Rabbi Dalman Schneier, who single-handedly came up with this idea to enhance the learning of Torah in Crown Heights. So the Rebbe should help, that he should have slacha, and everything he does, L'maylam Mashur, L'maylam Hidl Agval, L'maylam HaTorah. I want to thank our speaker tonight, Rabbi Gluckowsky, from Israel, who's world-renowned, and everyone's very excited to hear tonight's lecture about how to be a Chassidish parent, a Chassidish kinderlach. I want to thank Rabbi Rothbaum, who Pasha every night saved us and this helps Crown Heights, bringing Torah. So many shiurim, man doesn't stop. Like Rabbi Schneier said, he's like a train, it just keeps going. So the Yiddish intervention with Asacha and all that he does, unbelievable. And the last but not least, Rabbi Yisrael Leah Blank, the Menal of this Medrash, who basically is here every night, Al-Asar, making sure everything runs smoothly. Just to remind everybody, throughout the summer we have shiurim here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We try to bring quality rabbis and shiurim with supper, and please come and also invite your friends to come. And like this, Yagdol Teda V'Yagdol, and we have Mizaycha to these galas of the Rebbe, we have Namish. Without further ado, Rabbi Gluckowsky, please.
Okay. As high as possible. Is that okay? I'm blocking you a little bit high, but okay. Okay. First of all, it's heartwarming to see that there's such a program that to use out the evenings to be able to learn, and how important it is. Since it gives me chizik to be able to see, and also it gives me ideas for Eretz Yisrael too. Although that for us, summer is a little different than for you people. You know, our summers are a little different than our school system works different. We don't have the Catskills, and just like, you know, we don't have Sundays. You guys have Shabbos Sheni Shel Golius. We don't have that. There's a lot of things that are different, but definitely it's very inspiring, and also gives chizik to see what's going on. And Baruch Hashem, the shiur. And L'lechet Michael L'choil. There's the famous Hayoim Yoim of Chabez Tevis that the Rebbe quotes time after time about Chinuch, you know, from the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab says that just like it's a mitzvah every day to put on tefillin, it's also a mitzvah every day to think for a half hour about the Chinuch of your families, children, Bnei Bayis. And incidentally, the Rebbe even has on that, he says it's also talking about when you're thinking about that half hour for the people that have children already of Shidduchim age, thinking about getting them Shidduchim and also helping them to be able to get married. He says that's also part in the half hour. That's part of the half hour too. So, and that's the famous quote statement that we say. The Rebbe, in one of his sichos in Noach, Sichos Chelik Aleph, the Rebbe asks the Shaila, why did the Rebbe Rashab use the mitzvah of tefillin? He could have used, just like it's a mitzvah every day to say Shema, just like it's a mitzvah every day to daven. Why does he say the mitzvah of tefillin? And the Rebbe answers, over there, the Rebbe offers one of the explanations, he says, is that when you put on tefillin, tefillin is the kavanah that it says in Shulchan Aruch is he's supposed to have in mind that it's shibud alev hamoyach. The person has to subjugate his heart and his mind to serving Hashem. That's the shel yad and the shel rosh. So the Rebbe says that the Rebbe Rashab is hinting to the fact He's letting us know that when it comes to chinuch also, when he says about thinking about the chinuch of our children, our families every day for a half hour, it's to subjugate our hearts and our minds towards it. It's not just stam. It's to annihilate the cup and hearts, to put ourselves to it, our heart and our minds. That's what he's. There's a shtickle echo over here. Is it bothering anyone? Is it okay? I'm hearing an echo, a drop. But anyways, could be that it's just coming back to me. I know, especially that we're in the parish of this week that there's not supposed to be echoes. Kol Gadol Yosef, on Matan Torah. Anyways, maybe we'll talk about soon. Huh? Okay. Listen. Okay. Sounds like say there. Anyways, so the Rebbe says using our minds and our hearts towards it. You know, the MC before mentioned the fact Chassidish Chinuch, we want our children to be Chassidish children, and so on. Many times I say to people, what we would want from our children, and most of us will give a checklist to be able to put down, your Shemayim, the Stoivus, Hatzloch Limit Torah, if it's the boys, much more, Chassidishkeit. They'll give you a whole checklist of what they want in the Chassidish Chinuch. But the idea of how to get there, how to be able to have that results, that's where we need really the Shibud Alev HaMoich. That's where we have to put our hearts and our minds to. It's to think about how can we get there. Like, for example, I would say I would divide it up into two chalokim, to two categories. I would say, first of all, like we say by the Agodah Shel Pesach, Keneged Arba Bonim Divrei Torah. When we sit down, we have a mitzvah to tell our children about Yetzias Mitzrayim. So it says, Keneged Arba Bonim Divrei Torah. You have to take into account that you're speaking to 4 different types of children. In other words, you have to recognize the fact that your children are different. Each one's going to ask different kinds of questions. Each one's going to need different kinds of answers. And the Balagod is telling us right away at the beginning of the Agod that you have to take that into account. And the same thing in your families. Your children are different; they're individuals, and you have to be able to take that into account. Not everyone's going to go into the same shtanz, as we say. Everyone's different. I just saw recently a letter from the Rebbe that the Rebbe writes to somebody who was having a child that was having difficulty in a full day yeshiva atmosphere. So the Rebbe suggested maybe to another yeshiva to try and so on. But then the Rebbe also says to me, you should recognize the fact that just like there were Gedolei Yisrael B'limud, there's also in through the generations Gedolei Yisrael in Gemilas Chasodim, Gedolei Yisrael in Ma'aseh Mitzvahs. So in other words, your child can be from the Gedolei Yisrael not only in Limud HaTorah, but he can also be from the Gedolei Yisrael in the activists. Like I always say that I have one son that he became the Rosh Yeshiva, and I have another son that he built from the yeshiva. There's 2 different kinds of qualities that we have in when we come to our children. So we have to be able to recognize the fact in the Shibud Alev HaMoich is to recognize the differences in our children. And also we have to be able to recognize the Chanoich L'Nar Al Pi Darkoi. There's different ages, and we have to know how to shift our gear to be able to go from one gear to the other, to be able to recognize when a child is young, there's one thing, when he gets a little older, and there's different ways how you maneuver when it comes to the chinuch. And that also deals with Shibud Alev HaMoich, and to be able to take counsel and to talk about it and to realize that there's different ages and what's best for a different age and so on. I'm not going to go into, Shar, we can't teach the whole Torah on one foot, but I'm giving I want to give certain crossroads that we should recognize. And these are things that have to be taken out. So we're not living in an island all by ourselves. So we can take counsel with people, especially when we see people that are successful in the chinuch of their own children. We can ask them, give me some tips, or we can take, and speak to them about a problem or a dilemma that we're having and hear what they have to say. Is part, when it comes to thinking about our chinuch of our children, this is a very important part of it. Taking counsel and trying to help ourselves to be able to recognize and to develop our children according to their ages and according to their differences. That's one part of Shibud Alev HaMoich. Another part is, how do we motivate them? Different motivators. How do we bring them to motivation? For example, just to tell you a short story that my father, Olav Shalom, he was involved in the chinuch. One of the stories that he had with the Rebbe, when we came to Toronto to live in Toronto after we were living for 7 years in Detroit. So we came to Toronto, and my father he went around organizing a Mesiba Shabbos. And he pulled kids off the streets in Toronto where we lived. And he organized Shabbos afternoon in the house of Mesiba Shabbos. And, maybe, now that I'm living in Eretz Yisrael, when I say that, he went around the streets or taking Jewish kids off the street, for us in Eretz Yisrael, you just walk around the streets. The diamonds are there. They're all Jewish. But when I think about it, where we were living in Toronto, not everyone was Jewish. And he ran around into the parks, we were neighboring a public school ground. So he used to go into the playground. He went around looking for the kids and he found them, he put them together. And at one point, he had reached the point that he had over 60 to 70 children receiving Shabbos. And he wrote about it to the Rabbi. And that year, a couple of months later, or maybe half a year later, something like that, he came to New York and he was in Yechidus, and the Rabbi asked him, what's going on with the Mesiba Shabbos? So my father told him, it tapered off a little. It's a little schwach. There's maybe about 20, 30 kids now. So the Rebbe looks at him and the Rebbe says to him, are you giving them prizes for participating and also for answering questions? And the Rebbe started to tell him, kids, they like pens and pencils, and there's all kinds of pens, and they also like erasers, and there's different types of erasers. And the Rebbe started to tell them about pens and pencils and erasers in Yechidus to give them motivation to be able to come. Our big Rebbe, on his own initiative, asks him about what's going on with the Mesiba Shabbos, and then starts giving him suggestions on motivators to be able to help them. So when we talk about Shimon Alev HaMoyach, we're talking about how do we motivate our kids? What can we do to help that? That's part of the Shimon Alev HaMoyach. But then I want to get to the Nikuda. As I was thinking about it, I would like to suggest, the Rebbe offers this as one of the explanations. I would want to suggest another explanation just out of my own experience. I think that one of the reasons why the Rebbe Rashab said it's a mitzvah of tefillin, it's also a mitzvah to think every day, half a day, because mitzvah of tefillin is a mitzvah on the men. Women don't put on tefillin. A woman, a mother, does not have to be told that she has to think about the chinuch of her children a half hour every day. She never stops thinking about her children. It's built in. The Rebbe writes in the Sikha that one of the reasons why a woman is not commanded for chinuch is because she doesn't have to be commanded. It's built in naturally. It's in their DNA. They don't need a tzivui v'shinantam levanecha. They've got it by themselves. We have to have a tzivui. We have to have a commandment v'shinantam levanecha. So the Rebbe Rashab, when he says it's just like it's a mitzvah every day to put on film, he's talking to the men. We need to refocus, and we have to recognize, just like we know when we get up in the morning, one of the things that we have to do, it's our obligation. We go to shul, we put on our tefillin, we have to daven, we have to put on our tefillin. We have to recognize it's the same thing when it comes to our families. Our children, the Eibishter gave us kids. They're our pigdoinis. They're the ones that he gave it to us. And part of the obligation and also the schus of being a parent is recognizing the fact that just like you have to put on tefillin every day, you have to know that you have to think about and to deal and be involved in the chinuch of your children. And you can't say, my wife is taking care of it, the schools that I'm sending my children are taking care of it, and that's it. It doesn't work like that. The primary vishinantam levanecha starts with a father to his children. Of course, we give it to Malamdim. But what did the Alter Rebbe say to the Malamed that we always tell the story? I have a mitzvah and you have a mitzvah. I have a mitzvah vishinantam levanecha. You have a mitzvah to give parnosa to your family. We'll swap. I'll help you give parnosa. You'll help me with my mitzvah of the vishinantam levanecha. But the mitzvah is on us. So that's one of the things we have to recognize, we have to refocus and realize that we have that obligation, and it's negay and nefoshes. Now, one of the things is we're coming up to now, Parshas Veschanim is Parshas Matan Torah. And one of the things about Parshas Matan Torah it says that Royim es hakoilos. There was a ness that we saw the koilos. We saw what you normally hear, and we heard what you normally see. Royim es hakoilos. Now, one of the things for sure when you talk about Royim es hakoilos is that in our homes, we can talk a lot about what's right and what's wrong. We can tell our children what's right and what's wrong. But the question is, first of all, what do they see? It's not enough for us just to tell them what's right and what's wrong. We have to recognize as parents, and especially as a father, and especially for our sons and our daughters, they're looking to us and they're looking how we act. Maisa ovis siman lebonim. We're not talking about just Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We're talking about ourselves. Our children look to us, and that's how they learn how to act. And that's something that we have to remember all the time. The Torah that they're learning in school is a Torah that's in the book. The Torah that they're seeing in the house is Torah's Chai. It's the living Torah. They are watching us all the time, whether we know it or not. It's automatic that they look to us and they see how we act and all of the things that we're doing in our lives. The Gemara says in Shabbos, Harogel b'ner havibonav talmidei chacham. Somebody that's a rogel with ner, and Rashi says ner Shabbos b'ner Yontav or ner Chanukah, havibonav talmidei chacham. His children will be talmidei chacham. Shenemar ki ner mitzvah b'toydor. When you have ner mitzvah, it's ner Shabbos and Yontav and Chanukah, so then it brings to toydor. So one of the Meforshim asks the Shaila, the Ian Yankiv, in A Yankiv, he says, if that's the case that the Rogel B'ner we're talking about, that they're talking about Ner Shabbos and Ner Yontiv, so then why doesn't it say Harogel B'ner Shabbos B'ner Yontiv? Why does the Gemara say Harogel B'ner? And the answer that he gives is, he says, because it's letting us know another thing. When you want to learn Torah at night, when it's dark, you have to have a light on. You have to have a ner. You can't sit and learn Torah in the dark. Harogel b'ner, somebody that his children sees all the time at night, that he has a ner, he's sitting and learning. They see it. Harogel b'ner, havabonav talmidei chachamim. Then his children will know what's important, because they'll see that their father is kaveh itim l'Torah, and he's sitting at night and sitting and learning. And when they come home and they see that he has his chitas, he has his Rambam, he has his shiurim, he could have a chavrus in the house, he's on the phone learning Torah. Harogel b'ner, that's the ma'aseh of siman lebonim. That's one of the biggest things that we can do as a parent, as a father. That our children are looking to us. You know, it was once Simchas Torah, menem mashke, it was hakofis, and I was dancing in my shul. And a bocher in the yeshiva, one of the bochim that's my community, he took a little bit more l'chaim, and he gave me a clap on my shoulder, on my back. I looked around. He said to me, "Rabbi, I want you to know something." He says, "You're my mental futafas." Looked at him. Said, "What are you talking about?" He says to me, "I never knew I had mental futafas." He says, I never knew Reb Nissen them enough. I never saw them in my lives. They're in the book now. There's books now. He said, but I never saw them. I see you all the time. You're my Mendel Futafas. You, and he mentioned another name of a chassid, Zanog Yeshet, Rabbi Yossi Reichik. He knew him well also. So I looked at him, I was in the middle of a coffee. I told him, what are you, crazy? I'm your Mendel Futafas. He says to me, Rabbi, it's not going to help you. I'm letting you know now. That's the score. You're my mental futafas. Take that into account. What should I tell you? Pachad yain figure. I lost it. To tell me such a statement, and then I realized it's the same thing in our homes. Let's not kid ourselves. Our children are looking at us, the first thing. So if the way we are is one of the ways how our children are going to learn from us. That's it. If you're lucky, he might in yeshiva find some mashpia that has a great influence, and that even if you didn't do your job well, he'll do the job for you. That's only if you're lucky. Because usually it doesn't work like that. Because you're the one that's 24/7 that he's seeing all the time as he's growing up in his younger years and everything, and when he comes home. And you're the one that's setting values in the house. As I tell always people, we are the presidents, the prime ministers, minister of education, minister of treasury, secretary of state. We're all in our homes. We're the ones that create the atmosphere and the laws and rules and regulations and what's right and what's wrong, what's primary and secondary in our homes. And we have to recognize that. And that is one of the ways how we're giving into our chinuch, our own chinuch. There's a mimer from the Kibbutz Ayudim Tov Shalom Ches, when the Rebbe talks about the Mesiras Nefesh of chinuch, that the Frierdiker Rebbe in Pei Zayin talked about Mesiras Nefesh in Russia for chinuch. In those days, to send the children, not to send them to the schools of the Yisexia. But then the Rebbe says, just like then you have Mesiras Nefesh, we have to have Mesiras Nefesh for chinuch atzmi, for our own chinuch. In other words, we have to be committed and dedicated and devoted towards it and keep on growing and keep on showing an example. All the things that count. That's part and parcel of our chelik in the chinuch of our children. The examples that we're setting and who we are. What's our demus? What type of a mashpia am I? That's one of the things. And for that, we have to constantly replenish ourselves. You know, when you fly in a plane and there's a security video and they tell you when you're traveling with a child, there's no oxygen and the masks come down, what do they tell you? First, put the mask on. Doesn't say on your child. Even though that spontaneously a person would think to put his mask on his child first because he's helpless, he doesn't really know what's going on. It says, no, first put the mask on yourself and then put it on your child. And I thought about that many times and I said, you know why? Because if you don't put the mask on yourself first, the child might not have a parent that will be able to take care of him. You got to make sure you have your own oxygen to be able to take care of your child. It's the same thing when it comes to our who we are as individuals, that we have to be constantly replenishing and giving ourselves oxygen. You know, when the Rebbe Rashab said Or v'chayis nafshenu nitlanu limit achsidis, that we have Or v'chayis nafshenu, that's part of it. If we want to be rejuvenated, we want to have energy, we want to have enthusiasm, we want to be people that we can give, because you know when you're a living person, individual, when you're chai, you can be lahachlis, you can give life. But if you yourself are dry, cut and dry, and you're not replenishing, you're rejuvenating yourself and recharging yourself on a constant basis, so you really, what you're doing is you're living on ribis, you're living on interest from the past. I remember there's a sikha in Veschanan about there was no echo. When was the last time you actually learned it? Because you know there's so many different things in that sikha you don't remember. So we can't just live on interest. We have to be rejuvenating ourselves, recharging ourselves, and constantly growing. Then we can give oxygen, then we can give to our children much more. There's a letter from the Rebbe about a fellow that writes into the Rebbe that he's very disappointed about his family. And apparently from the letter he described what's going on in the house with sneers, with their cheretz, with Yerushalayim. It was pretty much of a disastrous letter. So what does the Rebbe answer him back? The Rebbe answers him back and he says to him, you're the head of the household. And there's a klal in alocha, gufa basar reisha ozel. The guf goes after the head. The body goes after the head. If the head of the house will be in the right place, automatically it will have an effect on the rest of the family. Put yourself into the right place. What's going on with your shur, your tefillah b'tzibur, with the way your hanhagas, mitzvahs, and ma'asim toivim, how are you acting in your house, and so on. Gufa basar reisha ozel. That's what the Rebbe is saying. Body goes after the head. So when we talk about, and even when it comes to, for example, when it comes to our hiskashus, our children can sense whether the Rebbe is a Rebbe for the bookshelf or the Rebbe is something that we're living. They know, they sense it. They can see how much you're living with him. How much is he a part of your life? They see it. Now, there's another thing also. It's interesting to note, we know that the Miftzoyim had different stages. The first mitzvah was mitzvah film, 1967, before the 6-Day War. The second mitzvah was mitzvah mezuzah. That started Yud Shvat Tov Shel Lamed Aleph. Then the Rebbe added on another 3, Bayis Molis Sforim, Torah, Stokke, everyone shower Pushke. And slowly built up to the 10. But Yud Shvat Tov Shel Lamed Aleph, when the Rebbe spoke about mitzvah mezuzah, he spoke another sikha at the same time, just like the mezuzah was for the house, to make sure that a Yiddish shtub should have a mezuzah. He also spoke something else about a Yiddish shtub. He spoke about the Shabbos table. He spoke about that today's day and age, because people are so busy and running around during the week, he says the importance of a Shabbos table is even stronger than before, because it's where the family gets together. And the family sits together and has a meal together. And the family has a time to talk together. And he spoke about Shabbos table and about the mishpocha. And that was Yud Shvat Tov Shel Lamed Aleph. Purim Tov Shel Lamed Aleph, he touched upon it again. He touched upon it on the posuk in the Megillah that says, Hayom ha'me'elu niskorim v'nasim, chol ir v'ir medina medina, mishpocha mishpocha, family. And he mentioned, Rashi says on mishpocha mishpocha, he says, oichlim mikasvim yachad, you get together, oichlim v'shoisim yachad, you eat and drink together, v'kach le'yosef mizarim. And this is the way how Purim is perpetuated and eternalized in the Jewish people by the fact that we enjoy it and practice it family by getting together and having a meal together, eating and drinking together. And again, the Rebbe spoke about it. Look that it says families getting together, families sitting together, families eating and drinking together. This is the way how Yiddishkeit is perpetuated from generation to generation. We have every week a Shabbos table. We know somebody, when you get ready for Erev Shabbos, you have what to eat on Shabbos. We can see in our own homes, in most of our homes, our women, our wives, the mothers are working in the kitchen. If it's from Wednesday, from the L'chudanan, the small one, or Thursday and Friday, they're preparing. Not only are they preparing, but we know the tchunas nefesh that they have. We know that they think about, this child likes with onions, this one without. This one likes this kugel, this one likes this kind of salad. And they have it in mind, and they're thinking about, while they're preparing, they have in mind who's going to be sitting at the table. And if there's guests, and it's guests that they know, and so on, they have in mind, and they're keeping it into account while they're preparing. The Misha Torah B'Erev Shabbos, Yochel B'Shabbos, is not just in physical food. The Misha Torah B'Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, Yochel B'Shabbos, is also when we're talking about our what we're preparing as fathers. What kind of a Shabbos table will we have? During the week, we know that we're going to be sitting at the Shabbos table with our families. We know that we have to prepare 1 or 2 stories, that it should be for all ages, because a story is something that goes for all ages. And today there's Baruch Hashem's forum on with stories of the Rebbe and the stories of Chassidim. There's the Sipur Chassidim of Rav Zevin. There's Parshas my Rebbe. There's different stories that have come out, books and stories. We have to prepare ourselves. We have to be ready. Not only that, even a sikha If we want to chazer a vort on the parsha, which we should, we have to tailor it. It can't be too long. It's got to be short, concise, so that the family should be able to handle it. We have to take into account the different ages. Not everyone is going to be sitting at the table the whole time. We can't force our children at certain ages to be sitting at the table at all times. Our children are not mini adults. We have to take that into account. They come home from schools. They have things that they learned during the week. They usually come home with a daf, with a paper. The ones that are in preschool, they come out with different things that they drew, different things that they did in the artwork that they did, the different things that they learned. We have to take it out at the table. We have to be able to show it to the rest of the family, to make a fuss of it. Even though that I had a Shabbos table always full of guests, but I must say, the first thing was at all my Shabbos tables was what the kids came home from school with. I took it out. I made a fuss about it. I showed it around the table, how they drew, what they said, what they learned, a little bit of a quiz on the parsha, asked some questions for the younger age. Not only that, my kids sat next to me. I felt it was important, even for the guests, to be able to see what it means a Shabbos table. That the first thing is a Shabbos table, I'm sitting with my family. That's part of the chinuch that they get, to be able to see that you take care of your kids first. At the beginning of the table, you gear towards them with all due respect to the guests. That's part of giving to the guests. I've had so many different guests that have told me afterwards that the biggest thing that they learned about our Shabbos table was after my wife's food, was how I ran it that first my children got the attention. And I geared it towards them. Afterwards, they want to go play on the couch, on to the side, but it was geared towards them to begin with. And a story goes for all ages. A story is a way to affect people of all ages. Not only young children, even adults. We're now at the Rabbi Parish's yard site today in Aleph Menachemov, and the Friedrich Rebbe talks about that when the Tzemach Tzedek would send him Yungalite to be nischanech, to get an education by Rabbi Hill. So the first thing he did for the first month, every Shabbos, he would tell by each meal a new story, cover the new Talmud that came. And then a whole week, the other Talmidim would go over the stories that were told for this new Talmud, and they would analyze and dissect and operate on the stories that are built, what you can learn from it for the first month. And the stories were known. These are the stories that he told for this Talmud. These are the stories that he told this Talmud. And the Friedrich Rebbe says, why did the Bills do that way? And the Bill explained, because it says, Odom ki yakiv mikem korban Hashem, a person that wants to do a korban. In order for him to become a Odom in Parshas Vayikra and to get closer to Hashem, he's got to go through Bereshis and Shmois, which are stories. When a person knows how to live with a story, how to analyze a story, how to learn from a story, it makes him into becoming a mensch. And that's why Rabbi Hill did that. That was part of his chinuch when a Talmud first came to him. In our homes, we have the opportunity. And we have books, Baruch Hashem, to help us. But we have to be able to be prepared. We have to go through a sikh or two. We have to know before we're sitting down at the table, just like our wives know that they have to make sure that they cook before to be able to have something at the table. We have to know that's the same thing. We have to prepare ourselves. That's part, as a father, sitting at a table, that the table should be a table of content. It shouldn't be just a pusti geschäft, or like I say, sometimes our Shabbos tables turn into hospitals. Why is they turn into hospitals? Because it becomes operating rooms. We put people on the table and we dissect them. We make biopsies if they're alive, and if they're dead, we make autopsies. And then we don't understand why our kids don't have so much their heads, or they don't have the COVID for people, etc. We have to recognize, like I said before, they're watching us. So how we prepare ourselves, how we set ourselves up for that Shabbos table, we as fathers, we have the opportunity, the grand opportunity, every Shabbos to try our best to give and have that influence on our children in a very nice, comfortable atmosphere. And it also means, and I'll tell you like this, another thing, also tip. Many times it's a good idea when you have a guest over or guests, because children act a little different when there's strangers in the house. They're a little more, they have decorum. They don't act up as much. So when there's a guest in the house or guests, they're more, they that's another thing. But on the other hand, I was always careful that I didn't just have meals with guests. I also had a family meal. Friday night was more for guests. Shabbos by day was with the family. And there was no one else. To be able to have that time also with my kids. Just with them. And there's different things you can do at a Shabbos day. You could say aloch in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch by the table. You could say a vort in Gola Bagula. Not only that, let a kid tell the story. Let him prepare it. There's the Medrash says beautiful sforim, oitzar godes haTorah, some nice midrashim on the parsha. There's different things, and also you take an interest what went on during the week. How was what they did during the week? There's different conversations and different things that can be done. A Shulchan Shabbos is one of the places where a father should be taking a central role and gearing the table with toichen and preparing himself well. And if you need tips and to talk about it, you speak it over with somebody. Because once a week, you have the opportunity, Friday night and Shabbos by day, to be able to sit and verbring with your family. And the Rebbe says that the way Yiddishkeit is perpetuated from generation to generation is what Rashi says. Mis'asvim yachad, oichlin v'shoisim yachad. V'kach le'yosef mizarim. Take a look in Rashi on that posik. Purim lamedalit, the Rebbe spoke a whole sikh about this. And that was behemshich to Yud Shvat Tovshin lamedalit. So that's another thing that's a very, very important thing when we're talking about as parents, especially as a father. Now, another thing I want to say is also, we're in the Parsha Matan Torah also. Another thing about, we talk about Parsha Matan Torah. We know that it says, Anoich Havai Lekecha is the Rosh Tevis, Ano Nafshis Ksobes Yovis. Hashem's telling us, I put myself into the Torah. I just didn't give a Torah. I put myself into the Torah. This is something also very important for us. We have to recognize the fact that if we want our children to be able to be dedicated and committed to what we value, we have to give of ourselves to our children. I once had a family that came to me, and the parents were telling me, what haven't I given to my son? I gave him as a child everything. I gave him what he needed all the time. I gave and I gave and I gave. I gave him when he was a child games, and I gave him a bike, and I gave him camp, and I gave him give. What's going on? I said, listen, you need a lot of siyata b'shmaya, but maybe sometimes there's another thing that we have to give, which many of us sometimes lack in that. We're not giving of ourselves. We're giving and saying, take and leave me alone. I need quiet. I need peace and quiet. Here, take. You're crying, take a pacifier. Take a bag of chips. Go to camp. Leave me alone. So sometimes we're giving a message, I'm giving, but I'm also telling you, but leave me alone. So the child picks up the message. He says, okay, if that's what you want, I'll leave you alone. So he starts looking where he can connect to somebody that wants to connect with him. We as a father we have to try our best to be connected to our children. We have to take an interest in what's going on in their lives. A child that's having a test, we sit and we learn with him to help him prepare for it. Not only that, when he comes home afterwards, how was the test? How did it go? A child that has a trip, a school trip, a camp trip, afterwards, how was the trip? You sit down, tell me about it. I'm interested in hearing. He sees that you're connected to his life. If you're connected to his life, he connects to your life. But if you're not interested in him, you don't have time for him. You're not connected. There's not that giving of yourself towards him. So he walks away from you because there's no real connection. So he looks to where to connect. He has friends to connect with. He looks outside of the house to get connected. But the more we're connected to what's going on in their lives and we take an interest, the more they stay connected to us. It's K'mayim upon him, Kain Lev Adam L'Adam. And that's something that we always have to remember. With all the things that we're busy with, we're living in one bubble, and our children are living with another bubble. Each one of them has a life. Each one has a lot of things going on in their lives. And the question is, how much do I take an interest in what's going on in their lives, that I want to show them that their lives is a part of my life? That's why it also, the Rebbe says in the Maimer, that's why it says in the Loshen Yochid, everyone felt that Hashem was talking to him personally. There was a personal connection between the Eibishter with Klal Yisrael. Each one felt that personal connection. We have to be able to work on trying to have a personal connection with every one of our children by taking a personal interest in what's going on in their personal lives too. And the more we show that, the more they connected with us and what we stand for. And this is something it's the learning together. We have the Avos Ubonim programs, the learning together. I remember once I had an individual in my community, Jay Litvin, Olav Shalom. He was a writer, and he used to write for Chabad.org, and he was involved in the Children of Chernobyl project. And as he was lying in his last months of his life, I came to visit him in his house, and he was lying in bed, and he tells me, "You know what our children need today?" So I said to him, I knew that he always had gedankim. He was always thinking. He says, "You know what our children need today?" I said to him, "What?" He says, "Our children need parents. They need parents. That's what they need." He says, "They don't have parents. Parents are too busy. They don't have time." You know, you take your child in a car, you're driving with him. So some people, the radio goes on right away. Others, phone conversations. You have a child in the car. Chapa shmooze. Ask him what's going on. Not only that, share with him your life. Tell your children about what you went through in life. Tell them stories about how you grew up. Tell them interesting incidences that you had in your own life. Share with them. Have conversations with them. I always joke around. I tell two examples I always give to people. I tell them, you ask my kids, what's going on in my thumb? My kids will all be able to tell you. I used to tell them the story that when I was a kid, 3 years old, I had a good friend in Detroit. I think he was 4 at the time. They told me that the Goyim, when they throw out their garbage, they throw out also toys and money sometimes. So let's go into the alley and we'll go through the garbage cans. So I was 3 years old. My older Chaver tells me such a thing. So we went to the alley. First garbage can, he tells me, go in. So I put my hand in, jagged piece of glass, bleeding, had to go to the hospital with blood. And I described the whole story. My kids, tell the story with your thumb when you had me looking at the garbage cans with the Goyim. Stop. Or everyone knows, I tell them, you know, I waited for a long time for my beard to grow. You know, because when I got my first tricycle, my bike, I didn't know as a kid, I was 2.5 years old. I thought you could drive bicycles on steps also. So I took my tricycle down the steps. So I cut myself open over here. So I was waiting for my beard to grow so no one should see the scar on my chin. Oh, they'd love to hear your story. Share with them. We grew up. We were also a kid. Talk to them. Share experiences, what you went on with school. How was your camp experience? How was the school? Which teachers you liked? What are the things you did? Sometimes you can even tell them a little bit of the Wilkiten. You have to be careful about that. How much? But the point is that you're sharing with them. You're connecting with them. If you're sharing with them and connecting with them, do you know how many conversations come up when you're not looking face to face? When you're a car and driving and you're schmoozing, you're not looking face to face. There's a lot of interesting things that can come up in those conversations. I have found that the Agav conversations that you have with your kids, you pick up information that you wouldn't pick up on a frontal conversation. Stop. You're schmoozing together in the car. You have time a little. Have time. Not everything is just the phone or other people. We have a primary responsibility. It is our families. And we can do it. It's just refocusing to be able to recognize what's primary and what's secondary and keeping the connection. Schmoozing. You know, one of my kids, sky was the limit for him. No, he was mamish, ADHD, should be ADHD, as I said. And there was no limits. So one time somebody asked him, what kept you in the ball game? What kept you in the ballpark? Sky was the limit for you. You could have gone anywhere. And he answered back, you want to know the truth, he said? He says, I was curious. I used to, But he says, I couldn't do it to my parents. I knew how much they loved me, and I knew what kind of pain it would cause them. I just couldn't do it because of my parents. There was too strong of a connection for me to break, even though the sky was the limit. Which means that by keeping that connection, you have Sundays. If you're not working on Sunday, have a good time together. Do things together as a family. Have fun together. Connecting, being a part of their lives, having fun together, being mechuber. That makes a tremendous difference. Of course, we need Shata D'Shmaya. Of course, there's other things that are going on in the world today, the environment, so and so on. But in order for our children to have that strong anchor and to be identified with what we stand for, the more we're connected to them and the more they feel that love. There's the famous Hayoim Yoim that the Baal Shem Tov says, that the Alter Rebbe said, naming the Maggid, that halavai, we would kiss a Sefer Torah with the same fervor and love that the Baal Shem Tov kissed the Talmidim that he took to school. I joke about that today, that today he would be in trouble, that Malamed. But the vort is that what we can learn from that Hayoim Yoim is that the Baal Shem Tov expressed the love that he had for the children in a very, very expressive way, in a very physical way. He expressed the love. It's the same thing with our families, our children. Our children should feel the love. They should feel how we're expressing the love. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just a kiss. We learned from the Frierdiker Rebbe the story that the Rebbe Rashab wrote in Mamayim as a Chassidish kiss. So there's different kisses. There's a kiss also. Listening to your child is a kiss. Giving your child motivation. Telling him how proud you are of him. Words of accomplishment. I was once participating in a Achnosa Sefer Torah. And I brought along my 5-year-old son at the time. It was a shul that all my kids spoke Sikhs in that shul, from one down to the other. And they were building a new shul, they made Achnosa Sefer Torah, and I participated. I brought the 5-year-old. And then as the meal was going on after Achnosa, so the Rabbi got up to get people to donate to help him building the shul. This was giving windows, and this was giving floors. And he was making a mishaberach for everyone that gives it. So one of the fellow, all of a sudden I feel my son tags me on he schleps me by my pants. And I look at him and I said to him, yeah? He says to me, I want to donate for the shul. I looked at him, 5-year-old kid. I thought he wasn't even, he's in his own world. I say to him, where are you going to get the money? He says to me, I have Chanukah guild. It was in the middle of the winter. For Chanukah. I said, how much money do you want to give? He says, 20 shekel. It's a nice sum of money for a child. So I said, so raise your hand up. So he says to me, I'm embarrassed. So I tell him, okay, I'll raise a hand together with you. So we both raise up the hand. So listen, I was embarrassed. He's giving 20 shekel, I'm not going to give. They bought him. So I had to give a donation also. And I say to the Rabbi, my son wants to donate 20 shekel. So they make a mishaberach, they take his name. As we walked out of the Chinuch Sefer Torah, I was going back to the car. I told my son, there's something that happened tonight by the Chinuch Sefer Torah that I'm so. It was a different kind of Chinuch Sefer Torah for me than any other Chinuch Sefer Torah I participate. And he looks at me and I say to him, because you, on your own initiative, wanted to donate to building of this shul. You're probably the youngest donor in this shul. I'm so proud. I can't even tell you how I feel. So I come home. I come into the house, and my wife says to me, how was the Chinuch Sefer Torah? You wouldn't believe it. That something happened over there out of this world as far as I'm concerned. And she says to me, what? And I tell her the whole story, how he schlepped me by the pants. He says he wants to donate. And I'm, the whole 9 yards with some salt and pepper and paprika and the rest on it also. And he's beaming to hear me tell the story to my wife. And thank God my wife gave a good reaction. She wasn't too tired. And she gave a good reaction. And he was all happy. Shabbos by the table. All my kids come home from yeshiva. And I sit down. And we're sitting. And I tell over the story in front of the whole table. The guests of my son gave it. And I was so proud and everything. So one of my oldest sons from yeshiva tells me off to the side. Tells me, Tati, the boy saying yeshes. You're building his ego. What's going on over here? You're making him a ganze chef. So I tell him, don't worry. When he comes to yeshiva, there'll be the people that will be oisik in bitla yesh. My tafkid is to build him, to make him feel good of the good things that he's doing, to give him the compliment, to give him the words of motivation, to give him the encouragement, to let him know how proud I am of his accomplishments. For every one word of criticism, 4 words of encouragement, 4 words of how proud you are. And when a father tells me, I have nothing really what to be proud about my son, I tell him, boy, buddy, open up your eyes, put on glasses. You're taking for granted a lot of things. Start thinking, start looking in the right way. Urei b'tuv Yerushalayim. Ayin toiva on your children. Look at the good things. The more you say good things, the more you give them those kisses and hugs, the more they'll want to give more. It's like a car. You can't live on gas that you filled up a month ago. You have to keep on. One of the ways is by expressing how proud and how we feel about them. Look how the Frierdiker Rebbe talks in his sichas, how the Rebbe Rashab would have with him walks and talks and words of encouragement, and he gave him responsibility, and he showed him how he feels that he could give him such responsibility. This is one of the ways in our homes. Those words of encouragement, those words of accomplishment, those words, positive words, is one of the ways. I see already that I'm over my time, so we're going to stop right here, right now. I'm just going to wish everybody, this is a taste. If you want, you'll have to fly me in again. Okay. The main thing is that we should all be matzliach, and we should be matzliach in the chinuch, and we should be able to say Ru'u Gidulim Shegidalnu, and we should be zoich already. It says Mepnei Chatainu Galinu Ma'artzeinu. The way to be mevatel that is through the chinuch that we give to our children, preventive medicine, so that we should be able to have the Gula Mitzvah Shleima taken from Yad Mamish.
Our sponsor, the Nishma, and the Shabbat Aliyah, that I put the better, and Shabbat Mashiach now. Thank you again, Rabbi Gluckowsky.
Is this father here? Getting the video. Huh? No, I'm sending him a video of it.